My name is Tim Zonka. I'm with Commvault. I'm our Vice President of Portfolio Marketing. And Commvault is a cyber resilience company. We're focused on serving the cloud-first enterprises, in particular, helping them fight through outages and attacks. And you're going to see a lot of our technology over the course of the next couple hours. To introduce a few people you're going to hear from, those that aren't necessarily presenting, but may chime in as they're either online or surely in the closed door session. We have Sammy Keating. She's online. She's our analyst and influencer director. We have Matt Barham in the room. He's our Senior Director of Analyst and Influencer Relations. Thomas Bryant runs technical marketing for us here at Commvault, and he'll probably be chiming in as well. And then Michael, thanks for popping up the agenda slide. Michael Fasulo, you'll hear from first. He's going to cover Commvault Cloud and how it helps organizations solve their resilience challenges, across their cloud estates. Then we're going to hear from Akshay Joshi. He's here in the room with us. He's going to be presenting on especially how organizations can make their massive data sets highly resilient. And then we'll wrap it up with Govind Rangasamy, and he'll be going through Cloud Rewind and how that helps companies help keep their data resilient regardless which of the clouds that it lives in. So we're happy to be here over the course of the next couple hours. Thanks for having us. And Michael, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Of challenges. I'm sure I don't need to explain this to many folks, but first and foremost, ransomware is everywhere and it costs organizations tons of money. Secondly, hybrid and multi-cloud complexity further complicate how we take organizations' data and keep it safe and recoverable. Resilience-related compliance mandates and regulatory continually change, making it really hard and stressful to keep up with all the latest things that are coming out of the EU and the US governments. And I would say the accelerated pace of cloud native development, along with the massive data sets that we're seeing from AI workloads, is certainly a challenge in protecting organizational critical data. So these are really daunting tasks that everyone's having to anticipate as things continue to move along. And unfortunately, the current approaches to resiliency only adds more complexity and cost. And in order to achieve the kind of resilience that organizations need, we built a unified platform so organizations can avoid having to string together, loosely coupled products, cyber resiliency tools, and even data protection tools. So, if I'm a AWS customer or an Azure customer, having to figure out how to get all the right discovery, dependency mapping, storage, backup, and security tools all together, that could certainly be a daunting task. And if you add, another region to the landscape, adding another cloud or even private cloud, complexity and cost continue to mount. So again, we are the only ones that I know of that really provide this unified resilience across all your data, all your clouds, and all the time. And what that ends up delivering is speed, scale, and the simplicity to a cloud-first approach for resiliency. So what does that actually look like in Commvault Cloud? This is a relatively good snapshot of everything that we do from a software standpoint, and we'll talk about some of the other things that kind of hang off the side. But at the end of the day, this is a pretty simplified view of what we're delivering, and I'll start from the bottom and work my way up. So it all starts with a zero trust, secure by design, foundation, and that's where we deliver scalable, comprehensive data protection foundation across cloud native, SaaS, hybrid, and edge. And on top of that, you can see we have this AI layer that we've trained on, the deep expertise that we have in the data protection space. And this allows us to drive smart defaults, prioritization, a cutting edge user experience. And that drives a lot of the simplicity that I just mentioned, along with, operating with natural language. And these use cases sit on top of that. So these use cases are focused on threat detection, isolated recovery environments, leading AWS recovery, and comprehensive application recovery, which we're going to see in depth a little bit later when I hand this over to my colleagues. Now, on top of that, we have these platform services, and we measure them against the highest standards globally: DORA, NIS, SOC. And I would also say that we have the trifecta that, in our back pocket with, FIPS 140-3, FedRAMP High, and even State Gov. So, we have these certifications and we really hold our product and our platform to the highest standards. And if that wasn't enough, we have several cloud-first capabilities that further drive resiliency. And that would include data security scanning and remediation, threat hunting. We have a plethora of anomaly detection, cyber resilience testing. So all of these things really prepare our customers to be able to recover, regardless of where the data may live, whether it's cloud, on-prem, or even at the edge. And we find that meeting customers where they are from an infrastructure standpoint isn't always enough. So we have a rich API set, we have bi-directional third-party security integrations that allow us to kind of share these signals. And Tim was alluding to this as he was answering some of those questions earlier. So, having these integrations with platforms like Wiz, Microsoft Sentinel, Palo Alto XOR, and Splunk allow organizations to really take all this rich telemetry and respond to threats as they arise. So high level, we laid out what the architecture and how the platform functions. I always like to provide just a little bit more context on how that actually unfolds so that we get a fly to like the real challenges that we have today. And, with the bunch of boxes that I did show, I know we were concentrating today on cyber resiliency, but, we have a lot of stuff that's left to bang, and we define left to bang as, everything that happens kind of a boil breach. Um, so we'll kind of talk about those first, and then we'll venture into, the right of banging, things that are happening, as they're unfolding. So again, as I mentioned before, we start with that zero trust architecture, and that's really the heart of the Commvault Cloud platform. And those capabilities start with CIS-level hardened images, MFA, multi-person authorization, passwordless, FIDO2 with YubiKeys, privileged access management, and RBAC. So all the things you would really expect. When it comes to cloud specifically, though, on top of those things, when we talk about IAM roles or permissions, we really focus on least privilege. So when you look at all the templates and things that we deliver as part of our recommendations, we try to make it as frictionless as possible to provide those things. So everything very least privilege. If you're only doing backups, everything is going to be very focused on just those things. So you can segment all the controls and permissions that you would have. And of course, if we're in the cloud, having cloud-based KMSs like Azure Key Vault, for KMS provides like flexibility and choice. So as customers are kind of, going through their digital transformation, that optionality and flexibility is super, super important. So then we kind of get into like what's on the slide, the operational compliance aspect. So when we talk about minimizing the attack surfaces, that requires discovery. Again, we were kind of talking about that earlier. And for us, like our Commvault Risk Analysis product allows us to do that deep understanding of structured and unstructured data discovery, classification and remediation, so that we could truly understand, what sensitive data we have in the environment. And risk analysis is one of those unique capabilities within our platform that actually allows us to function on live data in addition to backup data. So you could actually run risk analysis on your live footprint. It'll give you all the deep telemetry, and then obviously you drive further actions from there. And we haven't stopped there. I look at risk analysis as a product that, sure, we're talking about it from the left to bang, but we could also look at it from the right of bang when we actually have to provide evidence. So because it has that deep understanding of what was on the machine and the sensitivity level, if we ever needed to understand like what might have been exfiltrated from an environment, we could use its rich telemetry and details to provide that information. So some of these capabilities that we're going to talk about today are kind of a full suite. And, risk analysis, again, is another unique part of our portfolio where, we have deep integrations with even Microsoft Purview. So if you're using Purview for kind of your Microsoft estate and, your multi-cloud, and you need to have, deeper insights into, what's going on in the other pieces of your estate, those deep integrations allow us to kind of provide that full powerhouse of discovery and data understanding. Now, as Kim was mentioning, operational recovery didn't go away because cyber threats have taken the limelight. This is still a pretty critical component that people need to consider. So, our deep breadth and depth of supportability for workloads and recovery from classical failures like infrastructure, natural disasters. You were talking about the laptop before, and there's still honest mistakes that people make. You still need
Can I
to
have a
have the
question here,
ability to recover from that too.
Michael?
Question?
Yeah, one question. You're talking about these analyses that are happening post factum. So basically, after you did the data collection and move this data away from the original infrastructure, you analyze it on the repository, or you analyze it at the infrastructure that is in production live. Where is happening with the Commvault solution?
It can happen in either location.
Mhm.
So our data classification can absolutely happen on a live system. So it doesn't require a backup to do it, or you could choose to back up that data first and then perform the analysis.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much.
You got it. Perfect. So getting back to operational recovery, one of the other big things we do provide as part of our platform is what we call end-to-end portability. So we're able to transform workloads on the fly, and from VMware to an Azure, or you can make it an EC2 instance. You can lift and shift databases from a physical SQL server into a PaaS instance or RDS. So we provide a lot of that flexibility on the fly, just in case you're in one of those scenarios where maybe the intended destination was also compromised and you need to put it somewhere completely different. Having that flexibility allows you to really pivot in the event that a situation may arise. But we eventually get to that bang, as I was talking about before. So really that breach, and that's where things kind of get uncomfortable and all the unknowns come up. So we talk about, how do we deliver these deeper insights, and better yet, like how do we divert even threat actors from interfacing with like live assets? So a portion of our portfolio, Commvault ThreatWise, allows us to deploy deception technology. So we could deploy like these fake cloud assets that allow threat actors to interface with them. And because these decoys exist and they can be interacted with, we can record all the information. If they're dropping like threat payloads on them, we can collect those threat payloads. And ThreatWise allows us to take those payloads and detonate them into a sandbox, so like a safe environment. And with that information, you can now, better approach with super high fidelity information on how to remediate and, stop the breach from occurring or reoccurring and clean up backdoors. So, all of these things are kind of working in concert to provide you with just these additional layers as you walk through incident response, all these additional layers of, how this happened, what happened, and then eventually, how to recover cleanly so that, this doesn't happen again and you can get your business back up and running. And, as Tim mentioned before, the ability for us to take these signals and use these integrations and open APIs to send them into the centralized locations like any of these SIM and SOAR platforms that we integrate with, it allows everyone to kind of use that as a single layer of information to respond accordingly.
So, Michael, the cyber detection service that you offer is at your infrastructure level, or as at the customer's infrastructure level? I mean, I guess where in the stack are you doing this detection?
Yeah, so it's happening at both levels. Our anomaly detection happens agentlessly. So if we're protecting your assets, even before you even run a backup, we can detect if there's file anomalies, and we'll go through that actual scenario during the demo. So there's several layers of anomalies. I think there's about a dozen or so. So some of them are like pre-backup live on the file system. Some of them are backup related. Some of them are just monitoring how the machine is responding, and if it has a CPU overload or there's an excessive amount of memory usage. Those things kind of give us some indicators. And the reason why that's important is because when we marry those indicators together with other indicators in the environment, you can get a better picture on, is this a user that logged in at a weird hour just to go do something non-maliciously, or is there actually something bad happening into the environment? So that's anomalies. There's honeypots. There's the decoys that I was just talking about. So there's a lot of different layers that we have that provide us that higher fidelity, clearer picture on what's happening in the environment and in the estate. And we use traditional machine learning to really make sure that we cut down on a lot of the false positives that, a lot of these detection systems in the past were kind of played with. So I know Gen AI is usually the hottest topic, but there's still very much classical use cases where traditional machine learning is still deployed and very much the right tool to make sure that, as we're using these technologies to understand and try to reduce the blast radius as much as we can when we talk about the right side of bang, all of this left side of bang capabilities is super important to get early detection, faster response, and then we are doing that in concert with other tools in the environment. There should be less stuff that we have to do.
I guess my question is, are you plugged into cloud IO infrastructure to try to understand threat activity while normal batch or normal IO activity goes on? Are you required to have Clumio as your storage for
Nope.
your
Nope, there are-
applications, or is it just an adjunct solution that you have available? So you're not actually plugged into cloud IO APIs.
For certain indicators, we are. In certain cases, we would be able to detect let's just say you have an EC2 instance. These anomalies that I'm talking about, we just naturally happen. And because we're looking at the telemetry of the EC2 instance and the compute cycles, and we understand, how that looks in a normal sense as we're collecting information over a long period of time, when there's those spikes and things, we do detect that.
So
In other cases, if you're getting like CloudWatch activities and other things, we could react to those types of scenarios too.
So you're looking at telemetry to really try to ascertain what's going on using signatures or telemetry signatures to determine threat vectors
That's
and that
right.
sort of thing?
Yep, that's right.
I got
That's
you.
Awesome. So, so that kind of covers the canary files, the anomalies. We also have threat scanning capabilities that allows us to look at the backup data and make sure that it's clean of malware. And we do entropy scoring and other things in there too. We have YAR rules capabilities as an example too. So, again, there's this multifaceted, multi-layer approach that we've taken that you could deploy to really get that really high fidelity understanding on, is something really happening in the environment that requires my attention, or is someone just doing some work at an anomalous hour that's genuine and true. And then, as I mentioned before, we don't only do this by ourselves with just our platform, right? We have these integrations, Darktrace, Stera, Netscope. So again, this wider view of just beyond backup needs to occur because the faster we operate in this space, the less we should have to do on the recovery end. So reducing that blast radius down to as minimal as possible to get a business back up and running to minimum viability is super, super important.
So
And then, of course, go ahead.
So in an earlier slide, you had continuous cyber recovery testing as a cloud-first capability. Where does that play into this here?
Yeah, so I'll get to that in just a second.
Okay.
And after I cover that, if it's not satisfactory, let me know and I'll dive deep into it. And then we'll also see that part in the demo.
Okay.
Cool. So we're getting to my favorite part, right? When that's really recovery. And this is where these things all work in concert together. So again, I try to look at things in pairs of threes. We talk about our air gap protect, we talk about auto recovery, and then we talk about claimer recovery. And that's where, these three things combine, where air gap protect is our immutable and indelible file storage offering. And we provide that as a service to our customers so they don't have to think about it. It's not sitting in their tenancy. And it provides a next level set of protection against compromise. The auto recovery or the orchestration layer allows me to remove click ops and human errors and allow us to set policies that, we can automate the recovery so that we can provide really predictable results. And then, clean room recovery really provides that cloud-based IRE. And really what that does is it provides us this safe location so we can consistently and constantly test recoveries without actually impacting production. So this is, again, another service that we deliver completely in our tenancy to allow people to, stand up a isolated control plane. And then we can go through, an IRE to provide recovery testing. And because this is all event driven, it happens at scale and at low cost. So we're not in a scenario where, you're constantly paying these massive bills. We're doing things at low cost instead of all costs. And for us, next gen recovery can also occur today with capabilities like Clumio and Cloud Rewind, which, Akshay and Govind will cover just a little bit later.
Sorry, I have a question here. You have a plenty solution presented here uh, to conduct all the journey of the data you want to protect. The backend of the solution reside in your cloud, or it's residing on the on-premises environment of the customer, where it is?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
it's a lot of stuff there, and
Yeah,
and who's
sure.
managing that?
Yep. So we give customers the freedom of choice. You could deploy these solutions as on-prem software, very traditional. And we've been in business for over 2 decades. So we have a large proportion of customers that are still using our on-prem deployment software, and they're managing infrastructure in TIN and the software. We have our SaaS offering. So we offer these capabilities completely as SaaS. So that's our Commvault Cloud SaaS product, what used to be called Metallic. So you can consume it that way, and you get the SaaS-based experience. So if you're not interested in managing infrastructure and what you're seeing here, because again, even when we look at the architecture, there's a lot there, and it's not that you need all of it. Your situations may arise when you only need certain components of that, but we do provide that as an option. And then if you do want the appliance form factor, we also provide this as an appliance. And then there's cloud-based images and other things that I was mentioning before that kind of ease the burden if you're somewhere in between. And then if you could start on-prem and you could go move to, cloud-hosted scenarios too. So we provide a lot of that optionality and flexibility to meet your needs of today and even tomorrow, as your environment goes through digital transformation. So lots of flexibility there. Great question.
All right, so basically you can arrive to the model where you keep everything in your data center and there is no connection to the hybrid, any cloud or hybrid or any.
Yep,
Asking because some of the customers have this, let's say, closed environment without internet access, and they can use that software of yours with all the modules presented here to get the same quality both on-prem as well on the cloud, right? So one way or another.
That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. And in fact, we have many customers that use our product to facilitate that movement. So as I was mentioning before, like that any-to-any portability, let's say they were in cloud and for whatever reason they needed to retract back to on-prem. We would be able to transform, their cloud-based estate back to on-prem. That's the angle that they wanted to go to, and vice versa. Or if they wanted to move from, traditional VMware into something like OpenShift virtualization, as an example. Those all become possibilities, and they use our product to facilitate that. Because when you're doing these types of movements, there's a lot of risk there. So I know we've been talking about risk from a general standpoint, but even these data movements and these transformations are relatively risky. We remove a lot of that risk from the equation as folks are kind of moving around, because we know that there's going to be retraction. Sometimes you find that there's cloud-based services that you can innovate fast with, and then you bring it on-prem. So not only do we support that, we also provide a vehicle to deliver that outcome to them too.
Let me add something to the Saipal's question. Let me be explicit. Some of your competitors are moving everything on the cloud. And I'm talking from a cloud service provider's point of view and basing all of this stuff on data sovereignty. Now, is it in your path? I know that maybe you cannot answer, but I'm interested in having some kind of hybrid model or all on-premises model or only cloud model. That is the point that I'm looking for about the
Yeah,
competitors.
yeah, absolutely. So the product is flexible enough for all of those scenarios. And even if you have edge and robo-based locations, there's capabilities within the platform that also allows that to happen frictionlessly too. So, I know it wasn't a focus to, really talk about the platform, but that optionality, flexibility, and modality in how the product functions supports all those scenarios. Because again, our traditional customer base and our, modern customer base, require different things, and they may be moving from or shifting to some gradient level between, those two extremes that you mentioned before. So, many of our customers go through that. So not only can they exist in that, not only can the product facilitate the deployment and function within those environments, they certainly strive in them, and that's what the product was mainly built to do. And that's why, having broad breadth and depth, us being very close to the hyperscalers, using cloud native and event driven architectures allows us to do that not only just from a core standpoint, but also to do it at scale with security and cost in mind. Because again, we don't want to be operating at all costs.
Thank you.
Awesome.
So just to be clear, all your functionality is available clean room, cloud only, on-prem only, or in a hybrid solution, right? That's what you're saying? All this functionality on this chart?
That's correct.
And just to chime in here, I think one of the things I hear across both your questions is I think the trend that we see is, and this should be an obvious one, like people just want their stuff in the cloud. But when the optionality comes in place where they want to be able to dock, edge devices, on-prem devices, is usually because they have some sort of high-risk, sensitive data. Maybe there's legislation of what can or can't leave a country or a region. And but even so, we're seeing those people say, but we want the brain up in the cloud. So you manage that part. So that's like the prevalent thing that we see. So even though Michael's saying, hey, you could still have that, that brain or control plane like on-prem if you want, usually it's more of like the data for residency legislation.
Yeah, definitely. But the thing is here, it's what you want and what you can do. Because if I understand all those models, it's a pretty vast amount of infrastructure to be in place, managed.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to take it in operation. And on the first slide, you wrote that 60% of companies use more than 25 SaaS applications, right? And it gives another 7, right? The thing is that from one side, we make the infrastructure maybe more resilient, but from second side, we add another 7 or 8 or 10 systems to support that. And why I'm asking if you can do it on-prem, because when you install it on-prem, all of those models you need to manage by yourself. Do you have any service that you, for example, manage those infrastructure at the customer end on-prem because of the compliance issue? They cannot move to the cloud.
Only if it's our solution.
Okay, so you don't have appliance, like bring the appliance and you just like, okay, I pay you some buck and you manage that stuff on my side.
Yeah, and the typical customer of ours consolidates down from multiple data protection or resilience solutions to Commvault. And so, the average is about 3, but I've talked to plenty of customers where it's over a dozen. Or if you said, I was actually just talking to a customer at one of our cabs, and they're coming down from 25 different systems.
Wow.
And so to have some of that flexibility where it's like, hey, but these were covering something that might be more traditional, we need to be able to dock those. And so, yes, there are these 3 workloads or these 3 data centers or whatever it is, but they still want that kind of centrality and kind of frankly, like a central resilience policy engine.
Well, final question, I will stop myself a little bit. If you can handpick these functions, right? So I don't necessarily need to have all these functions to use your software. Still can use a little bit of AI discovery, I don't know, maybe a AI threat scan and stuff like that. I don't need to take all of them.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah, there's lots of different modules, and I didn't want to get into that complexity, but yeah, when you look at some of the boxes toward the bottom, these are not just products. Like some of them are baked into the platform itself. So again, based on your use cases, you pick and choose what you need based on the outcomes that you want to drive. And we talk about outcomes a lot because that's really what's driving people to solve these particular challenges that they're most plagued with. And there's certainly other things that we're not talking about today that become part of that plugged in type modality, so that people can really address the concerns of their organization that are usually distinct. So yeah, you don't have to get the full boat. I know there's a lot on the slide, and it looks like it's complicated, but many of these things are just called out because they're facets of the product that are driving a particular outcome, which ends up leading to how do I get the fastest, cleanest recovery. I'm looking for threats, or if I'm testing.
So that brings up. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to talk for once. So, sorry. No, but my question is about as a customer may be on a journey to adopt all of the features that we're seeing on the slide here, that like they may be starting in the very far left. They're just in the 3, 2, 1 stage. How complex or simple is it to start adopting those features over time, rather than going from the far left to everything in there? Is it easy to deploy the platform and pick and choose the features you want now and enable them as you go? Or do they have to have a complete roadmap and strategy to adopt it over the long term before they can even start adopting? Or
Yeah. So I think in the conversations that I've had with lots of customers and partners, if we're sitting on the operational side, which is usually a very classic and traditional approach, it's like, all right, how do I all walk run to get to the rest of this?
Right.
So those conversations usually end up with, some level of discovery, like, well, what keeps you up at night and where are you most concerned? And then we provide those recommendations. And then what happens is, as you start to plug those concerns, you may start to see additional concerns crop up as, okay, now that we solved, how do I make sure my backups are clean? I want to start testing them in a very frictionless way. What do I need to actually do that, so that if I do get hit with some type of breach, how am I going to respond effectively and cleanly without having to worry and scramble? And I can do that and provide predictability to my board or my C-suite or whatnot. So, a lot of times when I engage in those conversations, it usually is a crawl, walk, run approach, but it starts with, what are you most concerned with? And then, I have abstract conversations with some, folks that have like ultra high sensitive data. And the first thing out of their mouth is, how do I protect my long-term sensitive data from quantum threats? So then, we go through that particular kind of talk track about, what solutions we have on our product to protect against those types of threats. And then we kind of walk backwards from there. So, for me, it's always that crawl, walk, run approach, and really understanding what customers are most concerned with. I try not to take or make any assumptions for the most part when we have those conversations, because I've seen a wide swath of concerns kind of come my way, and we make recommendations based on what we have in the portfolio.
Hey, Michael, thank you so much for this. I think that this has been a great walkthrough of the platform and your capabilities. You've talked a little bit about how you've integrated AI across this landscape. Can you talk a little bit about how the attack fronts are shifting given the new tools that bad actors have with AI? And are you doing anything to address that?
Yeah. So we've had like traditional machine learning in the product for quite some time. I would probably say about a half a decade or so. And we use very traditional models to do forecasting and prediction, so that we could like load balance resources and making sure that we adhere to SLAs that are set as part of the policies. When we start to think about AI and Gen AI based threats, we look at it from a couple different facets, but most of them are uh, grounded on data, right? Like the data that are feeding these systems. Do you understand what's being fed in? And sure, there's like post filters and things, but when I was talking about really doing data discovery and classification and understanding and remediation, those are the first recommendations we always make. Like, take an inventory, understand what your data footprint looks like, and then react accordingly based on policies. And we find that users sometimes are over sharing and training, and that sensitive data gets in there just because they didn't know. right? Like it wasn't malicious. It was just done by accident. So, we kind of stress these tools to provide that wider scope of understanding, but it's usually grounded in data. And those are like very similar lines when we have these quantum conversations, right? Like you don't need PQC for every single thing that's happening in the environment. There's a pretty small data footprint usually that it would apply to. So we kind of talk about what those data characteristics look like, and then we apply those capabilities to just that data footprint. And for everything else, we have traditional methods that we apply to. So there's a lot of similarities between them, but when we talk about AI threats, it's usually grounded in what does the data look like? Do you understand that data, and is it being used in the right way? And we have compliance tools and other things that we have in the product that we didn't talk about that kind of further aid in that particular case. But if you go back to the example I was making with risk analysis and Purview earlier, again, these are all like really understanding the data that may go into these systems and that may expose you. And we do have remediation capabilities. So, we could do some data masking. We can obfuscate the data that's getting served up into these systems. So we do play some additional roles in there, but again, it's all very data focused.
Okay, I have.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I have a quick question, Shala here. One thing, so I'm kind of hearing a lot about threat detection, and one thing I was curious about is, are there ways to simulate like a disaster recovery event, or maybe like chaos testing to actually validate the resiliency? Because for me, that's something I would be interested in. That's something I get hit with a lot. Is like, are we sure we're safe? Like we have all these things, but is it actually going to work?
Yeah, I will talk in a little bit once I get to the demo about how we're actually educating customers to go through that in a live scenario, where we're actually doing like red teaming to provide customers that experience and how the portfolio you know operates in such a scenario. And we'll talk about mission recoverable in just a couple minutes.
Cool, thank you.
Hey, Michael. Priti here. I've got a broad question. I sit in the cyber team as an enterprise architect. And when I look at that slide, I see three different stakeholder groups: the data team, the cyber defense team, and then you've got the resiliency team, each with their own different KPIs and needs. And ideally, they get along, but they've got different needs. So how do you work with organizations to actually build something that came up, which is a central resilience policy? Um,
Yeah. So as I was mentioning before, building that single source of truth has really been a ground. It really has that grounding effect in these multi-persona scenarios. So as we're sharing things that are happening inside the product, where that scenario actually shines is, when we built a lot of the bidirectional integrations with our security tools within the ecosystem. Um, as an example, we're sending alerts into Sentinel, and maybe you have a ticketing system in ServiceNow. By us having like those deep integrations, you're unifying the information that everyone's using to understand how they're going to go about these things and how these tools all interact with each other. Because when you go through incident response, or even if you're trying to protect an environment or secure an environment, like these capabilities all talking to each other is super important. So when I mentioned ServiceNow, the ServiceNow integration that we have allows the Commvault admin to have some idea that there was a ServiceNow ticket that was created for this particular incident. We have the information coming out of Sentinel, within our platform. So we really meet customers where they are, and we're not forcing them to go into Commvault as an example, or we're not forcing the Commvault, backup admin into these other applications and try to figure out, what that source of truth is. We allow all of that data sharing across these integrations that we've built so that everyone kind of has that single pane to operate against. And we found that as a unification function. And then obviously there's a whole, awareness and enablement aspect to this, which, I'll cover in just a second. And, we found that there's some good byproducts that actually happen from, really asking these hard questions and having people go through simulation. And we find that like completes the full circle of not only having like these technical grounding, but also information and enablement grounding on these capabilities to kind of provide that full circle.
Another quick question, and this may get covered in the demo. It's so cool, but as someone who's heavy in DevOps engineering, another thing I'm wondering is what does like the alerting look like when something's going on? That would be cool to know because I'm always battling alarm fatigue, so I was kind of wondering what that's like.
Yep, I'll certainly show that to you at a high level in the demo, and then if we need to click in, we can certainly connect afterwards. This is the stuff I love to talk about, so we can do some show and tell.
Nice. Yeah, because I think if I remember correctly, I believe I saw you all at re:Invent last year, and you had like the whole clean room set up, and so it's reminding me I meant to follow up with you all because I was interested in the product, and so this may be later in the presentation as well. One thing I was curious about and now remembering to follow back up on is, what is a good way to just try to like get hands-on with it to see if it's a product that makes sense for you and learn it?
Yeah, I'll show you. Yeah.
Cool.
Yep, cool. All right. I'm getting pings on my timing. So I keep talking about enablement and awareness, and this is one of the things that we launched. And Minutes to Meltdown is to raise awareness of the last minute uncertainty that happens during an event. And when we launched Minutes to Meltdown, it was primarily focused on C-suites and execs, and it forces them to role play through a breach scenario. And why that's important is it kind of surfaces not only emotion, but the things that maybe you don't really think about as part of the breach. So you have your CIO, you got your CISO, you got legal in there, and as everyone's kind of going through that role play, you start to think like, am I really prepared? Have we thought about this? So there's lots of thought-provoking aspects of the exercise. And one of the best side effects that we could have ever had out of Minutes to Meltdown was execs started to think about, well, now that I understand this, are the folks with hands on keyboard actually prepared for this? So it's great that the executives have an understanding and alignment, but what about the people that are actually going to be orchestrating and doing these things? So what we did was we released Recovery Range, and this is where we have hands-on keyboard folks go through mission recoverable. And we did the pilot at RSA, and the teams loved it. So again, you're in a group of 4. It's a live event. You're in a live environment. There's simulated things kind of going on. So there's unpredictability and uncertainty, just like you would have in the real world. And we have folks go through a live cyber attack that gets orchestrated at the very beginning. And then we walk people through using Commvault Cloud to properly recover and bring their business back to minimum viability. So I know I'm kind of showing it on the right side, but again, Recovery Range was really for us to deliver the hands-on keyboard experience that becomes the next evolution of what we did with Minutes to Meltdown. So enable the C-suite and execs on, what incident response may look like, what happens during a breach, all the hot seat things. And then Recovery Range became the answer for all the people that are going to be hands-on keyboard. How do you actually go through this? So instead of continuing to talk about it, let me show you and walk you through a demo of an abbreviated version.
Is this attack like pre-scripted, like so that it really shows how well Commvault can respond and react to it? Or is it something where, the customer testing it out can maybe inject their own criteria into what's happening so that they can kind of test the limits of what your solution is able to recover from or detect?
Yeah, so with SimSpace, we do have the capability to customize like what goes on. So we found that like certain verticals are more concerned with certain attack patterns and different risks, right? It's not just about, hey, did you encrypt some files, right? There's data exfiltration risks, and I talked about quantum before. So there's a propensity for us to continue to customize this. So what I'm going to show you today is like the 1 hour abbreviated version in like 8 minutes. So we're going to go through this at like lightning.
Michael?
Yeah.
Can I just chime in for a second?
Sure.
So the other thing I want to say about the recovery range is that while it is a fairly prescriptive attack, and these are based off of real world attacks, and we have a library of about 80 of them that we can do, what they actually do each time is slightly different. So no two attacks, no two recovery ranges are exactly the same. And we find that's really important too, because when a real cyber attack happens, it's unpredictable. You don't know what it's going to hit. Is it going to hit in accounting first, or where's it going to move laterally versus elevating credentials? So every one is actually very much unique, even if it's using the same sort of attack vectors.
Yeah, and I'll actually show that to you as we go through the demo. So let me start this. So this is kind of the setup. So this is the customer site. This is your site. You got laptops, you got desktops, and the part that Thomas was just alluding to that I mentioned before is, we have a bunch of desktops and we can turn on user emulation. And what this will do is this will add some unpredictability into the entire scenario. So you have different users logging in, and they're actually going to be doing different things. They'll be sending email, they'll be building Word docs, they'll be IMing each other. So from a standpoint of unpredictability, we can inject that not only from the attack side, but also from the setup side. So in this scenario, we have TechBit. We have a front-end store. This runs our entire environment, and that's what we're going to see compromised. So in this particular case, now as the red team user, it's going to go through and it's going to run this attack pattern. It's going to do all of these things, and then we'll actually see it running in real time. So you're going to see all kinds of exfiltration. There'll be PowerShell execution. And then what's good about all of those things is it generates a lot of logs, and we get to look at how those logs are going to be not only from an operating standpoint, but also from a Commvault standpoint. So here the actual threat is going through. So we can see that there was a breach, there was lateral movement, and now there's going to be some exfiltration and encryption occurring. So again, this is going to happen across all the different labs that people have access to, and then there's going to be some variation in them. So now that the threat payload was launched, it started encrypting our files, our web servers are down, and now we're going to have to figure out how we're going to recover. And again, you can see we're starting to see these signals. You can see there's all variability between all these different desktops. So again, it's not a very static thing that's happening. So when we pop into Commvault, again, lots of rich events and alerts are getting generated. You can see that we're seeing an irregularity in the file activity being detected on the machine. So this is not being generated from a backup. This irregularity is being generated from activity that's happening on the live file system. And we're notifying the user that that's happening on the live file system. So again, there's no backup involved in that particular case. So you can see we're generating a plethora of file irregularities happening on the machine. These are all events and alerts, and they're happening across all the machines, and we have detection time and everything else. When we look at our threat indicators dashboard, which is kind of the sum up, now we're actually seeing deeper information about what is being indicated on these particular machines. So as I mentioned before, we have SIM and SOAR connectivity. In this particular case, we're moving the data into Splunk. This is what the environment is using for all of its events. So you can see we have a Squid proxy, and it's generating logs, and they're seeing information there. You can see that this is being generated from Windows event log. There's some robocopy happening. So it's not just Commvault stuff. So again, everything's kind of getting aggregated, and it's building that common layer of information. We're seeing some more sysmon logs of things that are happening. Someone's scheduling some tasks, probably putting some backdoors where we can see some payload information. So again, we're not just trying to say that there's telemetry coming from Commvault in this experience. There's going to be telemetry coming from everywhere and symbols. So now we're actually getting into what we're sending directly into Splunk. So now someone sitting in this interface is now seeing rich signals from the operating system. They're seeing signals from Squid proxy, and they're seeing signals from Commvault. So there's something happening, and you can see that file irregularity is happening across.
Michael, can you stop the demo?
Sure.
Yeah. So have you cloned the customer environment, and then this is all happening in sort of a simulated test sandbox kind of environment, or are you pretty much simulating all the security aspects and all the problems without having to use a copy of the customer's environment. I'm just trying to understand how this mission recoverable thing
Yeah.
works, I guess.
Yeah, so it's not a direct clone of our customers. So, recovery range is really a, mock environment of, what we see a lot of our customers most concerned with. So it's a representation. But again, in recovery range, there is that randomness in there that provides that unpredictability. Now, it's not impossible for us to say, hey, we can go build a complete AWS environment and then, go through this. Like that's all possible. But right now, it's a representation of, what we've compiled from our customer base based on their most concerns and how these pieces
And
operate.
so this role play is happening in a cloud environment, or is this on-prem, or?
No, this is an event that we host. This is a guided event that we host. All right, so for those familiar with Commvault, we're going to go take a look at the machines. We'll go do a recovery. And because we have detected anomalies on the machine, we will automatically exclude those anomalies from the recovery. So when we go to do the restore, we'll do last known good version. We'll unconditionally overwrite whatever is compromised with last known good. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll be able to get our file server back up and running, and I can tell the CEO that we restored the website and everything's all good. All right, and with the power of video editing, the restore is done, and my TechFit1 web server is now up and running and operational. So looks all good, and we haven't recovered, store 2, store 3, and store 4. And what we will do is maybe we want to have a deeper understanding on what's going on store 2. So we're going to run our threat scan job, and our threat scan product is the one I was talking about before, which will actually look at entropy scores. It'll look at threat signatures to really understand the payloads and things that may be existing in the system. Now, with that, again, it provides us with this deep telemetry, so you can see the extensions have all been changed to what looks like a threat payload extension, and again, threat scan will now flag all those files, and if we were to go do just a flat recovery, it will automatically exclude them from the recovery. If we were going to do a forensic recovery, of course, we could force the system to recover those so that we could do true forensic analysis, but by the default action, once we do detect anomalies in threat payloads, would be to exclude them from the recovery. Now, you may have noticed in the upper left-hand corner as things are moving, my store 1 has went back to your files are encrypted. So it's obvious we didn't clean up all the infection and that machine was reinfected. So now what we're going to go do is set up a clean room recovery. So we orchestrated the recovery of our CommServe in an IRE. So this is not my production CommServe. This is now a version of my production CommServe sitting in the clean room. I have a recovery group, as I said before, like we orchestrate all these actions, and this will allow me to bring my entire application back up in the isolated environment. And what I will use this to do is either validate that I can recover at a last known good. I could do further forensics here, or if this was a true disaster scenario where everything is scorched earth, I would be able to use this in production with some changes to the VNets so that it could get exposed accordingly. So with the click of a button, and 10 minutes later, I brought up my entire application, all my storefronts, the domain controller, and the backend. And now with that all recovered, I can go pass that off to my security team to go do that deeper forensics, understanding that I know when I just did the base level recovery, there was still something going on and that machine got re-encrypted.
So,
and then, of course, as we've been talking about all day, there's flexibility so that, if I wanted to manipulate the size of the machines, or if I wanted to repave the images of these machines, let's just say that the operating system was further compromised, I could, restore that machine and use a gold image of the operating system, and then reattach all of the application disks to that. So this is just kind of showing that we have a lot of optionality when we go to recover for these types of, really embedded threats. We do have functionality to allow us to recover from those things accordingly. So again, this is going to allow me to kind of restore that in a custom way. And if I jump back to my production environment, you can see that again, store one is now showing that I have more threats. Hopefully, my security team has cleaned the back doors. I'll go do the recovery again. Now that I know it's not going to get reinfected. Again, this will use last known good. So anything that was detected as a threat payload would be removed. And now I can successfully bring my TechBit website back up and my business is back up and running. So this is in a nutshell, how we're facilitating all of these capabilities across the platform. So, we started with detection of threats in the environment. We went into a SIM and SOAR where we're forwarding our alerts to really get an understanding of, and hopefully we're unifying all the personas across the estate to make sure everyone, as they're going through incident response, is able to do it. We did a recovery, which was the last known good. However, we didn't clean up all the infections on the machine, so the machine got reinfected. We then used clean room recovery to set up an IRE so that my forensics team can figure out how to get rid of those backdoors and payloads so that when I go to do the production recovery again, we'll be able to recover that data accordingly. And then we were able to do the production recovery after we cleaned up everything and everything was all good. And again, as we're going through this and it's generating alerts, all of that is getting forwarded into the SIM platform. We're providing evidence so that eventually when we do have to do the report out or root cause analysis or notify the SEC, like we have all of this data. So again, speed round, I know I covered a whole bunch of stuff in a very short period of time. Recovery range is an hour-long session, so there was some stuff that I had to omit just for brevity and time, but hopefully you kind of understand what we're trying to do by educating a customer, by not only telling them what the product is capable of doing, but also going through threat simulation and making sure that they understand how all these pieces work in concert together, providing a solid foundation of information, allowing them to test recovery to build muscle memory, so that as we go through incident response, it could be better, faster, and more accurate.
Okay, so quick question. Speaking about educating the customer, so I noticed, the dashboard tab in the demo, something I get handed with a lot. Are you able to create like custom dashboards so that way like top level execs can see something quick and simple and kind of see what's going on?
Yes,
And
absolutely. Yeah,
and
so
integrate with Power
absolutely.
BI?
Yes. So our reporting framework is awesome. So you could use the canned reports that we have in the product. We allow you to fully customize the reports in the product. And then we allow you to dump the data that backs the reports as an API. So if you wanted to substantiate the report in Power BI, you can just call that API. It'll already give you that data and you can visualize that data accordingly. And you could replace Power BI with any of these other data visualization tools. You can use Grafana as an example.
That was my next one.
Yep. So we make it really easy to go dump that data into all these other systems and really cater that data to your individual needs. So again, I know I'm probably just beating the dead horse here with saying this, but the product is really built with a lot of optionality and flexibility for the vast set of customers that we have. So these are all things that we remove the force function of having to live in Commvault, but still harness all of the rich data that we're generating into these other systems, meeting customers wherever they may be, across the landscape, whether they're going to be in our product or any of these other products.
Cool. Thank you.
Awesome. So with that said, I'm going to bring this back up. And, again, recovery range that I showed today was a much abbreviated version. There will be versions of this that will involve both Clumio and Cloud Rewind. And for folks that aren't familiar with Clumio or Cloud Rewind, I'm going to pass this over to my colleagues now so that they can provide you with some deeper insights on how they're changing the game on cloud native recovery.